Dr. Haji Sumanta Hashim, MIG, Rector of Iain Syekh Nurjati Cirebon. The Honorable Miss D. Brooks from the Jeddah Institute, Australia. The Honorable Professor Martha Seebeck from Lyon College, the United States of America. The Honorable Mr. Syamsuryadi, Assos MSE, from Iain Bone, Indonesia. The Honorable Miss Lina Kalfayan from DT Global, Canada. And all the presenters and participants in today's conference. We are very pleased to have you all in this international conference.
Hadirin yang terhormat, kami merasa bangga dan bahagia atas kehadiran Bapak dan Ibu di konferensi internasional Icon UCE yang keempat tahun 2022 di Iain Syekh Nurjati Cirebon.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the plenary session. Allow us to read the profile of the moderator for the first plenary, Mr. Lala Bumela Sudimantara, PhD.
Sebelum memasuki ke acara inti, kami terlebih dahulu akan membacakan profil moderator.
Mr. Lala is a lecturer at English Language Teacher Education Department, Faculty of Education and Teacher Training, Iain Syekh Nurjati Cirebon. He obtained his PhD degree in Interdisciplinary Literacy Studies from Charles Darwin University, Australia in 2021. Besides lecturing, Mr. Lala is very passionate in writing textbooks, modules, and journals. Most of his publications are written in English and in the scopes of literacy, writing, and English teaching and learning. He is also very enthusiastic in attending conferences in or outside Indonesia to present his research and thoughts on current issues regarding to English teaching and learning. Aside from teaching and researching, Mr. Lala also spends his time to do other professional activities. One of them is being a national reviewer for research, publication, and community service of the Directorate General of Islamic Higher Education, or DICTIS. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Lala.
Mari kita sambut Bapak dan Ibu dengan tepuk tangan yang meriah. Bapak Lala Bumela Sudimantara, PhD, yang akan menjadi moderator pada pemaparan sesi pertama.
Mr. Lala, the time is yours.
Test. All right. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So thank you very much for the nice introduction, Mbak Ana. And very good morning to all of you, Bapak Ibu from all over Indonesia. My name is Lala, and I'm going to be your host today. So welcome to Cirebon, welcome to Iain Syekh Nurjati Cirebon, and welcome to the 4th International Conference on University and Community Engagement. This morning, we are going to have two plenary speakers, one from the United States of America, Professor Martha Beck. Good morning. Glad to be here with you. And then we also have D. Brooks from Australia. She's based in Australia. Basically, we will have a hybrid event with D, but she's going to be running a bit late. So we will invite Professor Martha Beck from the United States of America to proceed to the stage. Please, everybody, give her a warm welcome. All right, so this is the curriculum vitae of Dr. Martha Seebeck. Please have a seat. All right. I will first introduce her for a moment, everybody. So, Professor Dr. Martha Seebeck is from College of Lyon from the United States of America. And she is a professor of philosophy. She received her master's degree in philosophy, Doctor of Philosophy from Bryn Mawr College. And then she has published 12 books and 44 chapters and journal articles. And she has been on numerous committees. She has been a member of the Lyon College Flow Choice since 1999. And this morning, Professor Martha is going to address the conceptualization of community engagement and university. So I think this is very important for all of us now to expand the notion of traditional university role. University has been traditionally known for assimilating knowledge, disseminating knowledge, but now I think many universities around the globe, or even many organizations on earth, are now challenged to produce a big impact on society. At the moment, yes, we are enjoying the high technology era. We also enjoying, everything that the world can offer. But then the big question is, why are there still so many poor people in our society? Social cohesion is now a big problem. War is still happening. Discrimination is still happening. Ozone depletion, and we have serious environmental problems. So I think in today's session, we would like to hear from Professor Martha how she will conceptualize the community building project in relation to the university role. I believe that Professor Martha has traveled around the globe, especially Indonesia, so she could probably compare the community project research in Indonesia and also in the USA. So Professor Martha will deliver the speech in 50 minutes, and we will have a Q&A session right after the session.
Okay, so
Thank you very much.
we're gonna put in,
I hope it works because the laptop is right over there. So
yeah,
yeah,
you got it? I have it, it's already on.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the show is yours, Professor Martha.
Okay, so I was assigned to speak on reflections on UCE in the United States. So, okay, good. All right, so thank you for having me. This is a big honor for me. I've been to Indonesia numerous times. Okay, I'm a philosopher. And so my mission in life is to try to communicate to people the intimate sense of the power of ideas. Ideas are extremely powerful, even though most people do not realize how much what they run into day by day was structured by somebody with some ideas. If you really want to colonize somebody, tell them that your ideas are better than their ideas. You colonize their mind. That's the way to get them. Okay, and when it comes to university community engagement, the expectations of professors are extremely different because the ideas are extremely different. That's the reason, all right? That's the key. All right, so you have Panchasila. Now, I love Panchasila, but this is not my culture. This is your culture. It's better, okay? It's more true to life. It describes life better. So, it includes many religious traditions, right? The view of God. I'm an Aristotle scholar, Greek philosophy. When I read Panchasila, I said, well, that's Aristotle's view. No question, right? But I grew up when there was a disparity between secular humanists and religious humanists. So I got into Greek philosophy because it was the bridge. Some people call themselves secular humanists, some people call themselves religious. Okay, Well, in your country, it starts with religion and then it moves to a broader humanism. In my country, it starts with humanism and maybe religion is okay, okay? So, I teach a class in world philosophies. If you just look at the virtues of Aristotle and you look at the lives of Muhammad, Jesus, Socrates, Buddha, and Confucius, you will find so many similarities. My students are completely convinced, they're first-year students, it's not hard. Okay, but the US ideology is based on a modern worldview, modern science, and that changes everything. Okay, so number 2, the goal of social and political life is cultivating human capacities, human flourishing. This is Aristotelian. This is not modern America. This is the United Nations. I've written quite a bit on Aristotle and the United Nations. I've written on Indonesia and systems thinking, so I've published if you want to find it. Then about unity and diversity, that's very Aristotelian. He gives an argument, a polis, political community, is not a unity, it's a plurality, and it should be with people talking to each other. And democracy is decisions based on deliberation. So this is Aristotle. It is not the US. The US is principles, right? Freedom, equality, rights. It's totally different. Okay. And the last one is social justice. The idea that the government owes people education, healthcare, basic needs, and then the people, once they get educated, they owe the society to give back. Again, this is not not American. Actually, Europe is different. All right, so the idea is that those with privilege, especially college educated, have a responsibility. There's an expectation to use their advantage for the well-being of the less privileged. Therefore, that's why the Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs have come together to form this policy. So on Panchasila, it makes perfect sense that it's required. Even at every university, it completely fits with the ideology. Aristotle thought that greed is the political evil. Greed destroys societies. He wanted a huge tax on the rich so that rich people wouldn't just give their children the wealth and you'd have a separated rich class. This is not America. Okay, so what are the virtues? The virtues are biological. Aristotle was the son of a doctor. He considered himself a scientist. So virtue is the way you respond to a situation that is integrated so that your biology, your social life, and your thoughts are all one. This is what makes you flourish. When you respond to a situation in a virtuous way, it means you are an integrated, healthy human being. So in relation to eating, drinking, and sex, that's pleasure, those are basic instinctual drives. Every society has to try to mold people, condition people so they can integrate those drives into the society. You don't repress them or deny them, but you don't allow them to be impulsive and go any direction. So it's always the mean between extremes. And people disagree, but that's what you deliberate about. That's deliberation. Well, what is the real mean, right? The other one is courage. This is another basic instinctual drive that we share with animals. We're aware that we're vulnerable and we get afraid. So we often have phobias. We fear too much or too little. So when COVID hit, there was all sorts of disagreements. Should we fear too much or too little? How many government regulations? But the idea is I don't think you should just totally shut down that one side was bad or good. It was just this constant process of deliberating. People disagreed. The worst thing that happened in my country was that the bars were open before the schools, and I don't think you did that. just for money. Oh. Generosity, this is very important, and so this is the whole giving back thing. If you can't give money, you give your time, you give your expertise. But people need to give back. The word liberal, the ancient word for liberal is generosity, okay? So that's how you build trust and goodwill between citizens, right? If you know that your next door neighbor gives money or gives time, you trust them, you get to know them, they show that they care about you, and you care about them. Very important. If citizens don't trust each other and they don't have goodwill for each other, Aristotle says, then the laws are just tools to keep wicked people from harming each other. And he says that is not political community at all, okay? The next one is magnanimity. This is the billionaires, right? We have global billionaires. Some of them are trying to suck carbon out of the air, Bill Gates and his friends. Some of them are determined to keep fossil fuel going, right? There's a big war among the billionaires of the world. It matters a lot to the rest of us what they're doing, but we should still do what we can. Even-temperedness, not getting too angry, but getting angry enough. If you don't get angry when you should get angry, the person you're with doesn't know they did anything wrong, and you hold a grudge. Okay, don't take revenge. This is just common sense, honest to goodness. And you debate about it, you know, how much anger is too much. I love teaching it because my students give examples, and they're all really good examples. No matter where they live, they can live all over the world. Ambition. So in college, that's why I like teaching college, is you just become more aware of who am I, as opposed to my parents and my siblings, and you don't have that many choices before you come to college. All of a sudden, you have this consciousness, awareness, all these other people, all these other sense of calling, and you sort of find what it is you really think is meaningful. Then you get the credentials. It's like the best link between what you enjoy doing and what the society needs, right? And you get the credentials, and then you go and give back, and you meet that need, and it's very spiritually fulfilling. So by spiritual, I mean living for the sake of something greater than yourself, okay? Honor, that everybody has social roles to play, but people go over and above their role. We had a woman who was an assistant in the counseling office, but she also started a recycling club, and she started a free store where you could donate, just totally on her own. That's the kind of thing for honor. You just do it to have a high quality of life. And you're aware that you have to keep making these extra efforts in order to keep everybody bound together. Friendships are extremely important. And friendship means bonding with all sorts of people in all sorts of roles. So if you're really living a complete life, you have many different kinds of connections, and everybody trusts you, respects you, and you like them, right? You know how to weave. It was the fabric of society, the social fabric. And the image was weaving it together and making it strong, right? 20% of his ethics is dedicated to friendship. And again, it's not friendships like the people I know. It's just all sorts of people, I should say relationships. Sociability, you put up with minor injustices, just so everybody will get along. Self-knowledge, this is really important because you have to know what you know and what you don't know. And people are arrogant, right? They'll think they know more than they know, then they don't listen. And then they don't find the experts who they need, right? So when you're making a decision, if you are wise, you'll bring in all the experts, they'll talk to each other, you figure out where are your disagreements, Where can we compromise? Again, this is Panchasila. It's also what we actually do, but it's not the American ideology. Then the next level is you have relationships with your family based on survival. Then you have relationships in society, teachers, mentors, friends, all sorts of relationships, religious organizations. Then, at a certain point, evolution developed to the point where you could think about political community. This is, Aristotle says, it's this huge leap intellectually and spiritually. You all of a sudden realize that you can create a community of citizens under common laws where the purpose of the community and the laws is to enable everyone to be a middle class, have a middle class life, and to flourish. So you're thinking about people you don't know personally. That's a huge leap in consciousness. Okay, so first of all, you just have a general desire. Your parents raise you to care about social justice. And then, over time, the art of statecraft. Okay, so being able to be a leader, okay, in any role, you can lead. As a student, you can be a student leader. There's all sorts of leadership. But leadership is not a science. You don't just gather data and figure out what sort of way to treat people like cattle, you know, positive reinforcement, negative it's just not like that. You have to show that you are a completely virtuous person, that this is really what you want. You inspire people, right? And you can persuade them because they trust you and you actually have goodwill for them, right? It's an art. It's not just a science. Like gathering data and analyzing it can be helpful. Don't do this, or this really tends to work. But nothing works if you don't have the trust of the people, right? If you haven't convinced someone you have a good character, nothing's gonna work. The economic system has to be regulated. People have to want to live middle class because then they will start giving back, right? The poor have to want to work to get into the middle class. The system has to be designed so they actually have hope and they can get there. And then knowing how to create laws, the art of legislation. These are all the political virtues, right? Virtues as a citizen. The art of distributing wealth. So there are things like education, healthcare that people need. How do you distribute it? People are unequal. If a government had given me a free ride to get a PhD in math, that would be a complete waste of money. I don't have that. But people show that they actually are capable, then they say, I would like to get this degree, and then the government reasonably provides it, and then they use their expertise to give back. The punishment of wrongs is equal. Everybody should be equal. You shouldn't be able to be rich and hire this expensive lawyer and get off, right? Everybody should have equal punishment or lack thereof when they're accused of a crime. Equity is applying the laws to particular cases, and the people who are in that position should be objective and they should be fair. In the US, that system is really getting corrupted by money right now. This is the integrated learning that you talk about a lot. We have the intellectual virtues, science, math, social science, skills, how to make shoes, how to do all this stuff, right? All those skills and logic, okay? All of those left brain things that you associate with school. The point is you have to first have the moral virtues and you have to tie the intellectual to the moral. And you should do it all the way along. That's what Aristotle said. And I think that's much more what Indonesia is concerned with, right? Again, the US, nope, we don't make any value judgments, right? So then the other thing is, so then when you put them all together, you're a completely virtuous person, you want justice, you have all this training, then you can start deliberating. And a way of life is that day after day, decision after decision, you make a really good decision. And sometimes you make a mistake, but in general, your judgment is trusted. You are thought to have, you have a reputation for practical wisdom, which is actually doing it. And he says everybody has good opinions, right? But some people still make bad choices. And Greek tragedy is full of people like that. And so the aspects of that is that you have the object of wish. Let's see. Okay, this is how it works. Everybody wishes for world peace. Is there anybody here who doesn't want world peace? Okay, but what is your actual decision? Do I come to this conference or not? I mean, the decisions we make are a long, long way from world peace, but they shouldn't ever lose track of that, right? What's the best thing I can do, as far as I know, to promote human flourishing? And it can constantly, as far as I know, knowing you don't know. So you could change your mind pretty often, but you're always asking the same question. Then people disagree on what's possible. People disagree on what's probable. Then they have to talk about it, because once you understand what you thought your choices were, what you decided, and why, next time you can learn, right? That worked. Why did that work? Or that didn't work. Why didn't it work? And it has to include all these elements, moral as well as intellectual. Okay, plus, the person with practical wisdom can go out to the public and persuade them to do what they need to do to go along with the decision. Because something might have actually been the good decision, but if the leader doesn't inspire people to follow it, then it wasn't the best decision, right? So it's very complicated. Some people are better than others at this, right? I would be terrible at this because I second guess myself, I overthink things. But I would be a good advisor to leaders, because I would say, hey, you're not thinking about me. And Jarot and I have been really, he's very good at practical, but I keep telling him, hey, Jarot, what did you do first? Well, he keeps skipping ahead, and so I'm able to write it down, what he does. All right, so this is preventing polarization. Does everybody understand this? I mean, this model's common sense, and it would prevent a lot of polarization because you're talking to people, right? And you have a character. I think it's very important. You've got to have these character traits to have a democracy or to keep a democracy. You have to have them to have any decent society at all. It's not getting more surveys, getting more data, getting more it's like you have to learn how to be, a good leader. It takes a whole lot. And you have to make a society where people want to participate in political community. The United Nations has the first 21 articles are very much the individual, right? The government protects my rights, right? I have a right to vote. I have a right to I have a right to this. I have a right. Okay, then the second ones are the social creatures. So it was China and Russia versus the West, right? And so they tried to put those two together. Again, Mr. No, he knew all this. He knew all this. I think he knows what he's doing. And so I think Indonesia's always been a big supporter of the UN. It's for this reason. It has the same ideology. So more social, culture, economic rights. I don't think you would believe that a huge percentage of Americans do not believe people have a right to an education or a right to health care. They do not believe that, okay? Okay, and then you have duties. Although the UN is right in New York, it was founded by a lot of Americans. America has never signed this document because it isn't our ideology. This is called socialism, communism, brainwashing, authoritarianism. All right, now I'm going to get into the US ideology, right? It was based on modern science. The task, the goal was to get rid of ancient wisdom, get rid of that paradigm very deliberately and replace it with knowledge, science, social science. There were two one of these was the ideology, we are going to look at the natural world as silly putty for science to exploit. The purpose of knowledge is to exploit nature for human well-being, right? God wants us to do this. God gave us the land to do this. We cannot get out of that mindset. And that's why we're the country with the most climate scientists and the most climate deniers. And our laws make environmental laws illegal, like they go against our Constitution. All right? That's really important because you have to say, why isn't the United States on board? If you just look at the founding ideas, it's clear, it's obvious, it's scary too. Okay, for human nature, there were two main models. Dualism, which is you impose concepts from your brain onto the world, and then, where'd it go? Empiricism. Okay, the other one is facts. All we do is look at the facts. And that one was moral relativism. The facts are everybody disagrees on virtue and justice. Again, they're throwing away the ancient view. Everybody, how do you know what flourishing is, right? We'll just create a society where the government stays out of people's lives, people decide what makes them happy. So the only purpose of government is military and police, to protect people against other people that would harm them. So it's exactly what Aristotle said political community is not, all right? Okay, all right. So the model of a rational person. All right, okay, in the state of nature, we are free to do anything we want, but there's these naughty people that take our stuff or hurt us. So we're going to calculate what's the most rational way for me to get as rich and secure as possible. I could fight back, right? He took my stuff, I'm going to take him stuff. But people tend to overreact, right? He cut down my tree, I'm going to go in there and cut down 5 trees, right? So then Locke argues with you. He says it's in your interest to give over the right to fight back to a standing body of laws. Does everybody get this? I mean, it's really a different mindset, but it's a very simplistic mindset, right? So the only purpose of government is to protect me against these bad guys, and I'll get richer. So you're rational if you agree to government because you're rational if everything you do is in your economic self-interest, okay? Locke did not want us to invent money. He wanted a barter system because he knew this was not going to go well. If you have money, the rich are going to, but lo and behold, we invented money, and so now we have what we have. Okay. All right. So being rich is an indication that you're rational and virtuous. And then in our country, they use their wealth for political campaigns. They elect politicians who keep the government out of the economy because everybody works hard and gets whatever makes them happy. Well, what about if you want to make money, you become a poll taker. You just ask people, what makes you happy? What do you want? You never ask people, What do you think would promote flourishing? What do you think would help develop the middle class? You never ask. It's scary, really. So then the focus groups, and then the rational, self-interested advertisers appeal to whatever it is people say they want, or whatever it is, if the politicians hire you, whatever it is people will vote for, right? And it's moral relativism, and it's all very factual, and it's driving us into the ground. It's ruining democracy also. There's no middle class. I hope you can understand that. If you take time to think about it, it's not difficult. And if you can figure that out, you can understand America, and you can, they're not the paragon of democracy, I'm sorry, especially not at this point in time. All right, so the key here, if that's your view, you would never require a professor to engage in university community activities, because they're free, right? You don't tell people what to do. So they're free to get the degree they want, to define it the way the profession defines it, which is very specialized, and just separate themselves from society. So individual achievement. Okay, early on, there were small colleges established by religious, the denominations that unified reason and faith. They did expect their professors to be good people and to volunteer. And I've spent my whole undergrad, graduate, and teaching career at schools like that. But they do not define the profession. They don't set up the reward system. There's specialization. This is the way the academy works. They try to model it on science. So if you're going to create a vaccine, you have to have people that are trained in highly specialized science, right? But it doesn't work for humanities at all. In humanities, you want to see what are the mistakes we keep making, like greed, you know? But you're never going to get, you know, a data set that will say that, because people won't even say they're greedy. They'll say they're virtuous. I mean, you just absolutely, it's a different way of thinking. It's reflective thinking. It's not data collecting. Again, the people who set this up knew that. They wanted to get rid of reflective thinking. So there's more and more specialization. The funding for people trained in science and social science is being given by corporations. So you're basically learning how to make products and sell products, not whether they're actually good for people, but whether people want them. And of course, you spend all this money telling people they want them. So even in the drug studies, there's so many levels that this is working on. So there's an obsession with the methodology. It's easier to get a better conclusion if you do something trivial. If you do anything complicated, you're not going to come up with a very good, T-score or whatever. You might not get your degree. So you just stick to something really tiny, and it detaches from your life. The model is the researcher is a detached observer. I don't get involved, but that's not the ancient view. Everybody is involved. Everybody's a citizen. Political science, I don't think I have time, but it is very ironic when it comes election time. Just to give you, they'll tell you, you're not supposed to associate a correlation with causation, right? If African Americans vote Democrat, you have to ask them why, right? You don't really understand things unless you ask what's going on in their mind. But that's not the way the political scientists, they hand us all this data. If you're minority, you vote Democrat. If you're an uneducated white guy in a rural area, you vote Republican. And it just pits people against each other. Do you understand that? All this voter suppression stuff is very heavily based on political science data, so they're not detached observers. They're destroying political community. All right, and that's enough, you know. The humanities discipline also have bought into postmodernism and construct, I mean, it's got all this jargon-driven stuff. And so when you do postmodern, first of all, the psyche's a blank slate, and we can manipulate it, and we can make people good. That was the underlying assumption. So now we have to, if we just get this new language and people learn this new language, it will completely mold them and they'll be good. It's just like, no, we're just back. I mean, meanwhile, people are going on with their lives and they have pleasures and fears and they fall in love and they have kids and all this other stuff. And the professors are caught up in this jargon-driven universe, which they've become detached from the rest of the world. So here's just some quotes from this person. I was a Methodist preacher's daughter, and my dad marched in Selma, Alabama. It was the civil rights, it was the anti-war, it was the environmental. There's a standard mindset that went through, and he did also. He was a Presbyterian preacher's kid. So he's talking about how this terrible jargon has infected the university. You get punished if you try to get involved with the community because you're supposed to be publishing more articles, right? The specialists look down. Now all of a sudden they have contempt, like they're part of the problem of polarization instead of part of the solution. Then he says, one of the signs of a dying civilization is that its language breaks down. And people, you've got to have a language that people use in their day-to-day lives. Like rule for the sake of the ruled, right? That's common sense. So I was saying about Aristotle, this is the way we actually talk, right? But not the language of deconstruction. Nobody talks that way. Even though the original motive was to expose the privilege in the modern Western language, it's created a whole nother layer of Western language that still is forcing, trying to colonize your mind. Okay, so this mentions the old social trustee, that was me, but it's gotten replaced by expert professionals who specialize and have all this jargon. So this is just sort of reinforcing that there's a lot of people raising the red flag and trying to get people to wake up. The true purpose of education is to make minds. It's thinking about ideas. Just like my lecture this morning, you think about the power of ideas, and you think about, you need to get the right idea about who you are, what you want, what you value, and you need to be thinking about it. It's not a given. You're not going to get it just by collecting data. You just have to think. And that's what Mr. Dershowitz says. And after the 2016 election, the American Philosophical Association, which I think every professional philosopher belongs to, they came out saying, you've got to get out there, right? You've got to talk to people. But that's not what Jadot talked, you know, that's the professor professing things and telling me you're stupid, and oh, okay, I'll tell you about this. It's not, I mean, the new model, Jadot, you start out asking people. This is what Socrates did, actually. So, you know, they threw out the Greeks, and that was a big mistake, I think. All right, so this is a statement from the APA. It says you shouldn't punish, you should include community engagement in your annual evaluations, which means they don't, right? And that's important, right? Plus, so basically they're punishing it because they say that the gold standard is still publishing in these high-status journals. You can't publish in high-status journals and do much community engagement because it's a totally different skill. Okay. All right. The Chronicle has something seriously wrong in the relation between the universities and policy. There's been a theoretical turn across the social science. that has cut off academic discourse. So people come out with these statements, but you know, I think you need to know the history of ideas to know why that's true, right? And how deep-setted it, I mean, really, we're gonna have to explore things a lot deeper in order to handle these problems. Yeah, I've been to plenty of these conferences, like I had to play this game, and they just do talk about stuff that nobody else can even follow, much less care about. Okay, so the incentive structure is based on this jargon-driven, and then there's the larger effects, the next generation. So what I don't want people in developing countries, the best and the brightest, to jump on this wagon and, you know, get separated from the public. So he's worried about the next generation. He's worried about the way this keeps replicating itself. And decision makers need to be invited into the academy. In other words, we have to have a dialogue. We have to do deliberation. We have to bring in people so everybody can work together and think together. Come on. Yeah, another one about we're producing a whole number of BAs who know little or nothing about humanistic thought, but even the humanists don't teach it in a humanistic way. So that's a problem. It's the society that needs fixing. And consider this. Is it possible to have a society full of young people who are creative, energetic, entrepreneurial, technologically informed, and wholly conformable with mass slaughter? Yeah, that was Germany. They were high-tech guys. They were really good at technology. We're on the verge of being the best trained and least educated society. Okay, as the societies grow, we also have to have the humanities engaged in reflection about what do we do with all this science and technology. And they said Plato is inviting his readers. There's nothing wrong with turning education over to elites as long as they give back. You know, it's okay to know more as long as you use it for the right reason. And that was my own work, was on Plato, how they had a great, they were set up in a way to encourage political association, and they corrupted the whole thing. And within 30 years, they elected a dictator. So don't do this. But when I teach it all over the world, all the students understand, right? Here's how education goes. Anyway, so yeah, my experience has been different. I have had this integrated education, and when I taught at the Fulbright in Bandung, I taught Western thought, and my mentor said, oh, there's something in Islam like that. And I thought, yeah, I figured there probably was. But you'd never hear about it in universities. Again, it's brainwashing. You never hear about the influence of Islam. And there's a lot. So originally, Fulbright, after World War II, wanted to send out people to be ambassadors. We have a democracy. Here's how we set it up. You can imitate us. But today, I don't even call it that. I call it collaborators, right? We need to collaborate. No more ambassadors, okay? It's just wrong. Like, we are destroying our democracy. So I want to work with colleagues, especially at UN, on articles that would link Indonesia and Pancasila and Aristotle and Greek humanism, because I think then your articles would be read maybe a broader audience. They wouldn't write it off as religion. And then it's focusing on the difference between wisdom and knowledge. That's the big difference. It's not between religion and science. That was another way of colonizing. The colonizers, Hinduism, Buddhism, they were ways of life. They were ergon. But the West deliberately called them religions and primitive, and Christianity is the only progressive religion because it lets you exploit nature, right? So just calling these things religions is a whole colonization process. We want to focus on wisdom and knowledge. So I thank you for letting me talk, and I know I talked a long time, but I hope to engage with conversation with Indonesia, come to a meeting of the minds recognize our common humanity. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Professor Martha. Wow, that's a very insightful talk that you made. So there are several things I can highlight from your talk. So Professor Martha Beck has expanded the concepts of community building into a larger notion. So in the beginning of her talk, she addressed the power of ideas, and then she also addressed how religion could actually be used as social improvement. Because I'm a Muslim, I believe that every single prophet sent to earth was meant to improve the social cohesion and the quality of life of the people at the time. And then it's very interesting when you talk about the community project, university role in relation to democracy. Because I think in the literature that I've read, I haven't read so much about that, but I think when we talk about the social cohesion improvement, the quality of life improvement of the society, we have to talk more on democracy as deliberation. We could probably talk more, everybody, about that, and then we will go to Australia. The second speaker from Australia, Dee Brooks, is right here with us. So we will have our discussion with Professor Beck and Dee Brooks after the second speaker from Australia finishes her talk. All right, good morning, Dee. Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you very much for joining us. So I would like to introduce Dee Brooks from Australia. So Dee Brooks is an international consultant for community research project in Australia and also here in Indonesia and other parts of the world. She is currently the director and board member of Jodari Institute, and also she is the current board member of ABCD Institute. And then her academic background is very interesting because Dee actually got her bachelor degree of social science from Southern Cross University, Lismore, New South Wales. And then she also has a postgrad diploma in entrepreneurship, innovation and social change. Well, that's very interesting, innovation and social change. I think we could talk more about that later. And she also has a postgrad certificate building asset and agency lessons from around the world. And in today's session, Dee will be addressing the topic of ABCD, asset-based community development, as a method in building community resilience and empowerment. I believe that every one of you are curious why Dee is focusing more on resilience and empowerment. When I saw the title for the very first time, it simply came to my mind. Do you think that people in the 21st century now is becoming less resilient, and then what kind of empowerment that we can actually have, right? Because there are so many people who live outside the system. There's so many homeless people. There's so many unemployed people right now, and we are facing lots of problems in the world. So I think Dee will talk a little bit about ABCD as an approach in developing the community project. All right, Dee, you are going to deliver your speech in 50 minutes. So the show is yours, Dee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, I do have some slides that I sent through. What is the best way to share them? Should I share on the screen here?
Kepada panitia dimohon untuk mengondisikan area depan agar lebih nyaman dilihat oleh para peserta.
All right. I'm going to put it up here and we'll see how it goes. All right, good. Okay, so thank you for the wonderful introduction. It is really a passion of mine. This work is in my blood. Now, the slides that I'm going to share with you, you can all have a copy of them. There is a lot of Bahasa on the slides. I do not speak it well, but you will be able to follow along very well. And a lot of that came from my work when I was invited to come and be part of the SILE activities that we did in, I think it was 2015 and 16 in Surabaya and Makassar. And so there might be some of you here who will see your photo in the slides. We will see. So ABCD came from originally Chicago in the USA. Well, they rediscovered it. I mean, we really think that it's the way that people organize in communities very naturally, from the villages to people in neighborhoods. It's the way that they gather. But Jody and John discovered this way of viewing community. So looking at building communities from the inside out, because they already have really strong foundations and assets and strengths and building blocks there, and we can build on them. So what we're looking at is the glass half full or half empty? And the approach of ABCD is really looking at that half full, what we already have there. So when we're looking at the glass half full at the bottom, we're looking at communities and citizens already have capacities and assets. They already have them and we can build on them. Whereas if we are looking at the glass half empty, we're actually viewing community from the deficiencies and needs rather than the strengths and the assets that are there. So what is ABCD? So ABCD is really looking at what's strong, not what's wrong. And that's a really key one. We want to look at those strengths. We want to place community at the center of local decision making. We want to activate individual and community participation and really build on community leadership. And community leadership can look very differently to what we traditionally think. Community leadership might be one of the mothers at the end of one of the streets who is looking after the kids after school while everyone's at work. So she is a leader. She might not identify herself as a leader, but she's in a leadership role. And we want to really strengthen local connections and relationships. So ABCD as a methodology, this is what it can look like. And it's not a linear way of working at all. We go backwards and forwards, but this just shows a bit of a pathway. So when we discover the strengths of individuals, communities, networks, organizations, resources, all of those, we can organize and map them in very locally focused ways. Then we link them together and mobilize, or we find ways to move them forward. And then those community-driven initiatives come out of there, and then we're sustaining those. And like I said, we could go backwards and forwards in this line, but it's really starting from discovering those strengths and assets. So with a needs map, a traditional way of working, quite often at the top there, we have external organizations who control the funding, and they trickle it down into communities in different ways that may or may not be exactly what the community want, but it might be how they are labeled. Sometimes it gets down as far as the family or individual. So, oh, what happened there? Something's, aha. Here we go. So when we're looking at that glass half full, what we want to find is ways that we can engage people so they can be part of the process. So part of that co-design, having those discussions with them, we're looking at those gifts of individuals and how they are connected to local and non-profits, how they are then connected to local institutions. So I think universities have a huge role to play in this. When I was working for the University of Newcastle in Australia for 10 years, we were doing outreach work, and we would outreach to people and ask, what is it that you care about in your community? How can we help you to build what you already have and build on the strengths that you have? So when we're looking at that glass half full, then we're finding what people really care about. And we can have discussions with them about things that are really important, their neighbours, their networks, their skills, their abilities, and whatever else they have to offer. So when we're looking at the community building model and how it's different from social services, we've got that focus on assets, and we build from opportunities in community building. Whereas a social service model, we're focusing on those needs and responding to problems. Now, I'm not saying that either is wrong. I think our intention and our purpose is depends on, you know, which angle that we look from, which perspective. But from an ABCD perspective, we have an emphasis on networks. We focus on community. Our goal is to empower people and build relationships. Whereas in the social service model, the focus is on the agencies or the service. And then the focus is on individuals. People are offered a service, and power comes from credentials. So when we look at that different power model, in ABCD, we're focusing on relationships and how we can share power. So then that says that people are the answer and people are citizens. Whereas in the social service model, it says programs are the answer and people are clients. So like I said, it's not saying that either is right or wrong, but what it offers is a different way to think of your intention and your approach. So then when you're talking to community members or other services or people who you are supporting or working alongside, you can think from that perspective of, are we trying to build something with people that we can share power in community? Then an asset or a strength-based approach is a really good way to start. So there's 6 different types of assets to connect in community in the ABCD model. And this was actually one of the drawings from, I think we're in Macassar in this one. And so we looked at the 6 different assets and what it might look like if they all came together. And that was one of the representations. So the 6 types of assets in ABCD, we have the individual talent, skills, and passions of people. And that's a really important one. It's not the traditional assets of just buildings and cars and things. This is actually people have skills and abilities and passions that they like to share and they like to offer. The second one is associations. So we have community groups and networks, and they might be formal or informal. So it might be a formal network that meets every Friday around childcare, or it could be just an informal network of mothers who meet at a local park on a Saturday morning. But those associational groups are something that we can really tap into as a strength in community. The institutions, we've got those government and non-government agencies. So very, typical ones like churches, schools, multicultural centres, neighbourhood houses or centres, any of those that have a bit more of a organizational role in community, but what they can offer, they have strengths that they can offer, and can be some very simple things, and I'll get to that in a minute. The fourth asset is the physical assets. So it could be land and property, buildings, equipment. I remember when we were in Macassar, there was a lot of talk about the water. fishing, you know, a lot of those, they are huge assets of the local community. The fifth one is economic assets. And this is where we're looking at the productive work of individuals. So what are people actually doing that we can kind of support to strengthen or move ahead if that's what they choose to do? We can look at consumer spending power from an economic asset approach. So where are people spending their money? Are they leaving their community and spending it in a large shopping center, or are they keeping the money local and shopping with local markets and farmers and fishers and that kind of thing? And then those local small businesses are huge assets in community. And then the last one is stories and culture. And within those stories and culture, we find assets of heritage, we find local identity and values that we can tap into. And when these 6 assets are connected for good, for intentional, you know, social change, we can have the most incredible things can happen. So that first one, those talent, skills and passions of individuals, and this is when there was a cohort from Mora who came out to Newcastle University, and this is when they were being taught an Aboriginal dance by a local dance crew. But there are skills like the murals on the wall there. That was in Surabaya. So there's these skills that are right there in our neighbourhoods, in our communities that we can tap into. Our community groups and networks. So we know there's a lot of those. And quite often we might have meetings with so many different people, but we don't map them. We don't think, how many are there? What can we tap into? Who can we invite into a conversation? So quite often services or community groups might work alone, but what can we do together? So there's government and non-government agencies, like I already said, there's so many of those that we can tap into that have, you know, sporting equipment. They have kitchens that we can use. They have prayer spaces. There's just so many things that in those agencies we can tap into. The physical assets, so like I was saying before, that land, sea, buildings, equipment, there's a whole lot of action that can come from there. I remember there was one of the groups in one of the pokchas we were working with, and they looked at the vegetable scraps in their community lining the streets, and what could that be? How could that be different? And they ended up going into production and making packets of snacks out of those. And then that also became a social enterprise and an economic asset. So looking around at what we have, you know, right at our fingertips can be an amazing experience. So then we've got those economic assets. So the work of individuals, like I was saying, with the spending power. And there's one of my favorites there that I make sure I have every time is the Pisang Epe, one of my favorite little businesses that you see around. But it is this money that comes through community that we need to circulate through that community to keep the local economy more healthy. And then, of course, like I said, with the culture, we have stories, heritage, local identity. They are everywhere. You can find them in every neighborhood. And I think it's really important to remember that the assets that we see, or the assets that are right in front of us, sometimes you can't see them. It's in the telling, it's the sharing of stories and the sharing of cultures. So with ABCD, we talk about these 6 assets, and we had a discussion around what drives these forward to, you know, do some good work in the world, or in local neighborhoods. And the drivers here we've got, the first one is with hope. And hope there is as an acronym. So it's helping other possibilities emerge. And I really love that this takes that a passive word of hope into an action word. So when we are driving forward with an ABCD approach, we're looking at how we can help other possibilities emerge. The second one is care. And this is one of my favorites, and I think really important to think about, is that when we're discovering what people truly care about, we are finding their motivation to act. And that is key. That is really important. Because if I went and I asked Jarrett, let's say, I said, Jarrett, I'm going to go and work down at the local park this Saturday morning and pick up the rubbish. Come and join me. And he might say, well, yes, I do care about that, and I'll come along with you for one Saturday, but it's not really what I care about to act on in my community. But thank you for doing that. Whereas if I asked him, what do you care about enough to act on? Then he will tell me what motivates him. He will tell me what he cares about. And I think that is one of the most important differences in this work, is rather than going in and looking for problems and offering solutions and putting band-aids on things and telling people that we know, what this encourages us to do instead is to ask. So ask what people care about. Once we know what they care about, then we can look at what those other assets are and we can connect them up for good, for change. And then the third one, of course, is relationships, which seems very obvious, but I think it's also important to be intentional about building relationships, maintaining them, and strengthening them. So constantly, keeping that in mind and keeping those relationships built and maintained. It's one of the reasons I'm here right now, because we have maintained relationships. So I think that's another really important part of relationship of ABCD. So one of my Australian colleagues, Peter Kenyon, who I'm actually here in Sydney with right now, I'm at a conference with him tomorrow, and Peter says, people support what they help to create. Then they want to make it happen, which is so true. We know that when people are involved, they want to be part of it then. So rather than dragging them along and saying, please come along to this, or we need your help, if we actually discover what they care about and invite them to co-create that, co-design is such a powerful way to work. And I think often people forget that co-design is about everyone. I've seen agencies who have done it on their own and still called it co-design. But when we find those people who want to be part of it and they want to make it happen, that's where the power lies in moving forward. So when we talk about asset mapping, we're looking at the assets and potential that is in communities, and it's everywhere. There are so many assets that we can invite people to a process called asset mapping. There's lots of different ways to do it. So I'm just going to go over 3 or 4 different ones, and it might be, it might be, it is. It is only a few in the different areas of asset mapping. So Jody and John, who were the co-founders, John particularly says here, every single person has capacities, abilities, and gifts. And living a good life depends on whether those capacities can be used, abilities expressed, and gifts given. So we want to create those opportunities for people to be able to share and offer what they can. So this is one mapping tool. And I know there's probably a few of you there who are listening who have done this, either with me or with someone else. And so this talks about these different gifts that you can give your community. So the gifts of the head is something that you know about and you enjoy talking about with others. And I like to really emphasize here that this is not something that you are expert in. It doesn't have to be expertise. It's just something that you know about and that you enjoy talking about. So as it says there, it could be art, history, movies, birds, could be anything at all. It's a gift that you have in your head that you like to share with others. Then gifts of the hand. So we have skills that you know how to do and you like to share with others. So it could be gardening, cooking, knitting, welding, woodwork, carving, anything. Something that you like to do with your hands and you like to share with others. Then gifts of the heart. So this is things that you care deeply about. What kind of wakes you up in the morning and you have like a fire in your belly and you think, I've got to do something with this today? So that gifts of the heart is something that is very deep for you. So there's a few examples there as well. Then gifts of the heel. So this is, what do you do to stay calm? If you're feeling stressed or you're feeling there's too much going on, what is a gift you give to yourself? And it might be with others as well. It might be that you walk or swim with other people, or you might just need time alone. You might just do some meditation or some prayer or just to spend some time. What is it that you do to calm yourself when needed? And then the gifts of human connection. So how do you stay connected to your local community? Do you know your neighbor's name? Do you know the people in the street? Is there someone who you visit regularly on a Friday? Are you involved in your children's school? Do you help to coach a local sporting team? You know, whatever it is, anything. But how do you stay connected to the people in your community? So what we do with this as a mapping tool, we could do it in a variety of ways, and you can also completely make up your own. One of the ways that we do is we will ask people to get into pairs, so just two people, and take these gifts of the head, hand, heart, heel, and human connection and go for a walk for half an hour and talk about them together. And then when everyone comes back from their walk, then we can write them up on posters on the wall, or we can discuss them. We can talk about who is connected, who has similar interests. There's a whole lot of different ways that we can kind of map these. I did do one activity with young people in a youth center. So that would have been young people aged about 12 to 18 years old. And so they paired up with someone. So there was two people in each group, and they got some, the flip chart paper that we use in workshops, and they put it up on the wall and they traced around each other. And then they wrote on each other's tracing, and they wrote, this is what I think the gifts of my friend's head is. This is what I think the gift of my friend's hand is, and heart, and so on. And it was really lovely to see these peers share each other's gifts, and then they could have a discussion. And a lot of the discussions were, the young people saying, I never thought that of myself. I did not think that I had that as a gift. And it was a really lovely way to bring those out into the open. So this is a very simple community map. And there's lots of different ways you can do this one as well. But this is based on those 6 assets that I showed earlier. So you might just list them, but not just to list them so you've got a directory. It's more than that. When we list them like this, then we're looking at how can we connect them up? Where are some relationships that we could build? Who would we like to invite into a conversation about next steps or our future together? So we can map these out just to understand how many are there. With one of the projects here in Australia, after some very big bushfires, and they were afterwards, they were mapping almost like, what have we got left? It was a huge fire. There was over 200 people died. And there was so many properties and buildings and farms and houses that were gone. And so they started to map these. And from what they had left, what they found by mapping it, they were able to find where the overlaps were. So they were able to find the lady who had a whole lot of material left over. They found 4 people with sewing machines that they could get together. And they found young people who wanted to learn how to use them. So they were able to connect these people up. And then it was for the good of the community. It was very locally based, and people could really step up and share their skills and abilities. So with organizations, when we're looking at how we map organizations, you can do a couple of very simple things. One of them is like this, that we can look at, so who are the organizations we do know, and map them out. And then who are the organizations we don't know, as in we haven't had a talk to them. We haven't built a relationship with them. We don't know them yet, because that's your potential. You've got potential to reach out to them and say, we'd like to invite you in to the conversation. And I know with a lot of the work we did when I was over there in 2015 and 16, we looked at how can we invite people from the community into the university space, that they felt that they were able to, you know, have those conversations. And we had conversations with about 80 people. That was, you know, university staff and with community members, having those conversations together of who do we know and who don't we know. And they were able to map those out. So then we can look at, what do they currently do? So what do they offer? What are they already doing in community? So then we can find where things might overlap. And we can invite people to join together in a stronger way. With some of the organizations, what have they talked about doing but have not yet done? You might be the missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So sometimes there might be organizations who say, even say with, you know, a large social issue around homelessness. Let's go with that. I'm just going to make this up off the top of my head. But if an organization has said, we do a lot of social work, we would like to help with the challenge of homelessness, we're not sure how we're going to do it. And then there's another organization who says, we already have networks that are supporting people who are homeless, but we don't have places we can meet. We don't have telephones or photocopiers or, you know, anything like that. So, and the university does. So it might be that we're just linking people up because we're offering something that they have talked about doing, but they haven't been able to do it for some reason. So we can link up those missing pieces. And then the last one is, what might they do if we ask them? So the worst they can say is no. But if we do ask them, please come in, have a conversation with us, help us. Is this something you can offer? They might have other ideas. So it's just being very open to the conversations that might be available. So when you're looking at your organization, or say from the university perspective, from a university perspective, what do you have that you can offer to community who might already be trying to do something good in their community or their local neighborhood, something that they're trying to do that they don't have the resources to be able to get there. And within your organizations, you've got personnel, like you've got staff, you've got people there, you've got expertise, you've got a whole lot of wisdom and knowledge that you can share. You know so much of, you know, whether it be research or articles or even upcoming papers or things that you're hearing about that are future, you know, challenges that you can share with people. You've got economic power. And that doesn't mean always, like the asset said before, it doesn't always mean just funding, but that economic power about supporting small businesses and finding out how we can keep, money in a local context. You've got constituents, you've got students, you've got networks, you've got so much there that can offer to strengthen what a community might be doing. You've got those networks of connections. Another one, like I often think, that's why I'm here today, because of those networks of connections. And I'm sure there are thousands more from all of you. You have space and facilities, you have rooms, you have lecture theatres, you have canteens or lunch rooms or amenities. You have all this stuff that you could offer to community. And you've got materials and equipment. And that could just be chalk for a chalkboard, or it could be a photocopying machine for someone who said, I want to do a wood carving project, but I don't know how to invite people to come and join me on a Saturday. You can help them do that. Like there's so many things that we have that we can offer that can really strengthen what community is already doing or what they're trying to do. This top 100 partners, is about mapping partners and stakeholders. I do have this on our website, and it is, there's another page to it, and you can download a free version of it. So I'll show you that link in a minute. But when we're looking at these top 100 partners, there's a couple of steps to it. So we've got our business, we've got our government and non-government, we've got volunteer area and lived experience. And when we map all the people in that quadrant, then what we do is look at these different steps. And so the steps, what they offer is that once we have everyone's name we can think of on that partners and stakeholders mapping, then we identify the top 3 in each quadrant and we invite them in for a conversation. And then once they're there, we can start to co-design. We can ask them what they care about. We can look at what might a community conversation look like in a much broader sense. We can ask then those people to do the whole process again and invite their 3 people. And already we double the numbers. But it's written out in more detail on the website. So you can see the link there, and it will be in these slides. You can go directly to that. But the idea around this and where it came from was actually from friends of ours at the Tamarack Institute in Canada, in Toronto, and they were looking at the issue of homelessness and how could they really create, an impact. And what they needed was people from all 4 areas of that quadrant, because not one area could do it alone. They needed the local business people who might have had financial leverage or ideas about how to address homelessness. They needed the government and non-government agencies so they could offer what they could to such a huge challenge. They needed the volunteers in the homelessness sector, so the people who were already running soup kitchens or doing midnight deliveries of food or sewing sleeping bags for homeless to sleep in. They needed those volunteers who were really grassroots and hand-on. And then most importantly, they needed those people with the lived experience. They needed the people who were experiencing or had experienced homelessness to be part of the conversation. And like there's a quote from the disability sector that says, do not do anything about us without us. You must have the people affected by the issue in the conversation. That is just so important. So there's a lot of case studies around this, but it's a simple process, but it's very effective, very powerful. I've used it many times. So the 3 key steps to asset mapping. The first one is discovering those assets. So what is there? And don't stop there. We don't want to just discover them, because then we've just got a list. We want to move beyond that. The next thing we want to do is join them together. So how can we join those assets for good? So we might hear about someone who loves helping out and looking after abandoned or street dogs. I'm just picking one off the top of my head. And then we might go to another neighborhood and we hear someone else who is also looking after abandoned dogs. We can link them together, and rather than people working in silos. As for, joining those larger assets, it could be something about like the pokja I was mentioning before. We've got farmers who had the cabbage and carrot scraps, and then we've got people who have knowledge about an industry of making food. So we're linking them together as well. That leads to the third one, which is so important. We must create the opportunities for these assets to be productive and powerful together. And certainly in that example with the pokja and the farmers and the making the snacks, the university created that opportunity for the assets to be productive and powerful together. And that was just so important. They created that space. They offered what they could. It was really fantastic. And I hope some of you were there. So coming back to this idea of the glass half full or half empty, and thinking of, well, what does that mean for universities? What does that mean for the way that you might work? When we're looking here at collaborative creation leads to sustainable change, we've got this wonderful quote, and I actually first quoted this at the Icon UCE conference in, I think it was 2016, when I was there, when we were talking about in-reach. And it's really stuck with me because I really like this perspective. So when we have service learning models, so they have further extended the reach of humanities and the arts into the larger community. So that's what ABCD talks about. So it's through speaker series, book clubs, outreach programs, as well as in-reach, where community leaders come and educate academics about their ideas and practices. And I just think that is one of the most powerful things that universities can offer community, is how can we be in this together? We are all teachers and learners. So types of in-reach. So the first one, we've got these community leaders educating academics about their ideas and practices. So having people come in and having those learning conversations with them about what they care about. What have they been acting on in their community? What kind of things do they do? What are their ideas? And listening to those deeply. And then also for academics and institutions or universities, identifying the strengths and assets that they have, the ones they're hearing about from community, and the other ones they know of outside of the university that they have to build on. So there's these two ways of working that are still both teaching and learning. And it's also offering people pathways to further education as well. So one example was from the university that I worked at in Newcastle in Australia, so north of Sydney, Australia. And it was this retreat called Special Needs Unlimited Group. And we ran 15 different retreats with 72 families, and we had university students come and volunteer at these retreats with children with a disability or a special need. So the students came along and we were all there as staff. There was social workers, anthropology, there a whole lot of people who were part of that. And then the students played a crucial role by assisting with all the activities. So the students were able to tick off a lot of their service learning needs as well. And they accompanied families to medical visits, and they made sure that things ran really smoothly. So unlike most service learning, there were no explicit links to course objectives, but students could create their own links because between their experience and their study, they were able to learn so much more deep and richer experiences than they would have on a regular service learning placement. So this was, I know some of you know, Dr. Graham Stewart, who was one of my colleagues. And as he says here, the experience of SNUG suggests that service learning does not need to have formal links with course objectives to provide students with the opportunity to contribute to the well-being of families and learn from their experience. So there was the most incredible stories came from this. And this picture is actually young people with a disability on an ice skating rink. And they had been told before they could never go ice skating. They couldn't do it. They were in wheelchairs or unable to be on skates. They couldn't do it. And so they found a way with these students, with these parents, and these children got to experience ice skating. So as a bit of a summary for ABCD and together with InReach, and you'll hear from those 6 assets of ABCD and the drivers of discovering what's strong and not what's wrong, and the InReach idea. It values community members' skills, talents, passions, and abilities. So it values them and it actually encourages and invites them in deeper. It identifies the strengths and assets of a university and builds on them. So it actually uncovers more strengths and skills of staff and students who can step up and say, I've got this to offer. I've got this skill. It's not something that might have been asked in their coursework, but when they're part of that service learning or being part of a community project, they might have skills that we didn't ask for, that they are willing to put forward. It supports interdepartmental relationships. So crossing those traditional boundaries or borders between departments, because we want to invite other people in from medical, from dental, from wherever it might be. We want to invite them in to be part of it as well. And lastly, it strengthens relationships for future service learning opportunities. So if we have built and strengthened relationships in communities with one lot of students coming through, we've got those relationships there that we can tap into for next time. And so we can continue to build those relationships. And they're not only for students, but for the ongoing relationship building in the university community engagement space. So, we know students is only one part of that, but it would strengthen those future relationships by being able to look at it from the glass half full. So I didn't put a lot of this in about the monitoring and evaluation participation, but just that there are some really fabulous tools, some really great ways to be able to monitor and evaluate these ways of working. So with a historical timeline, you can use photographic evidence of change. There's a whole lot of different methodologies around that. The interview or scorecard, which is more like a results-based outcomes or result-based accountability. There's different ways to look at that. The most significant change technique, which is one we did use and apply. I think it was in Makassar. We did use that, and it's a way of monitoring and evaluating a project through storytelling and story sharing. So there are lots of fabulous ways to be able to still get what it is that we require from a project, or to support students to have a rich learning experience, and it's not difficult for community either. They can really share their lived experience. So just as a couple of examples of how we might apply or look at ABCD in a university space. So these ones, this is just one example. So what we did was 2 days of like a train the trainer. This is what ABCD might look like. What are your ideas? And we built like a bit of a model for then when we got community to come in and join. So day 3 and 4, those new trainers, I stepped back and those new trainers stepped up, and they had co-designed the community workshop. We had about 80 community people come in from what I remember, excuse me if I'm exaggerating, and then they co-facilitated day 3 and 4. And then we had a day 5 where then we did a reflection and feedback and said, how was that? What have we now discovered? What do we want to do next? So that was just one way of applying that, by building capacity in community engagement and development. Because one thing that I was very sure on very early on, before I even arrived there, was that it's not my community and I don't live there and I'll be leaving. So it was one thing that I wanted to be very strong about, is how I could build the capacity of the staff and of the people who came along to the train the trainer, how I could build capacity effectively and efficiently, so then when I was gone, they could continue, and they did, with the most amazing results. And then one in Singapore, a little bit of a different example. So for day 1 and 2, we did a train the trainer. And day 3, we just did 1 day of those new trainers. They co-designed a community workshop. And then on day 4, they facilitated a whole day of community conversation and reflection. And my colleague Michelle was with me in this one, and we were both there on day 4, but we were sitting right back. So one of the ways of ABCD talk about working is leading by stepping back. So we would step up into leadership when it was needed, and we would step back when it wasn't. And so they co-designed this whole day for their community in Singapore, and then facilitated it. And it was, yeah, fantastic. And so many good things came out of that as well. So I think I'm going to be finished a little bit early, but I just want to offer these reflection questions. And it might be things that, not for now, but that you talk with your team, you might reflect on just as an individual. But some of these questions, and these came out of our work together in 2015 and 16, but it might even be with your team. You might once a week have a check-in and say, what have you learned this week? Just find out what's something new, what's something that happened this week, what's new for you, what will be most relevant to your future work. So what is it that's happened recently that you think might be really significant, something that will be relevant to what you want to do? What skills and abilities do I have to offer to the further development of my university? So what's a skill or ability that you might not have shared before, or something that will offer future development, or a different pathway, or a different way of working or looking at things? And then what strength do you now see your university has that could be used to improve the community engagement program? So are there different strengths that you're uncovering as you're having conversations with your team, with your colleagues, with other departments, with the community? What are some of the strengths that you now see your university has to improve that? And then what next steps can you take? And who can help you? So that could be an exercise in thinking of what are the next steps that I can take, but who might I like to invite to come along? Who else wants to come for the journey? Who wants to help me? So that's just a few reflection questions that I'd like to offer before I close. This is a quote, one of my favorite ones from Harold, who's with the Ontario Rural Council. And he says, the wisdom of the community always exceeds the knowledge of the experts. Always. Because community is the answer. It is in community where you will find what you need. So you can offer wisdom, you can offer the academic knowledge you have, but the wisdom of the community, they know what is they'd like to work on, they know what their challenges are. They've got answers there. We just need to go and ask. We need to have deeper conversations with them. And then we can also offer our strengths to say, here's what I can offer to help you strengthen what you're already trying to do. So in summary here's a couple of old photos. In summary, start with what's strong. We want to look at those foundational building blocks to really get us going. And dare to think small. This does not have to be a groundbreaking, enormous festival or big project. This can be small steps. It could be small steps about having conversations with local neighborhood people about what are the skills and abilities that they think they have. What is strong and unique about their neighborhood? It could just be in asking them and finding out all these incredible things. And believe me, it happens. It's like a treasure chest. I absolutely love doing it because people come out with so much. So that dare to think small is start with small steps. Start with shifting your language. Start with asking people what they care about enough to act on. Ask people what their gifts of the head, hand, and heart are. But we can start with those small steps. And then remembering to celebrate the small steps. So the celebration of the small steps could be something like a local mothers group got together and started a social enterprise sewing shopping bags. I'm just making it up now. But it could be those small steps that you might think, hey, those mothers are getting together every week now. Let's celebrate that. Get a cake. Have a party, like say, yes, we are making change here. We are doing something, and celebrate with those mothers or whoever it is who's doing something. But we come up against brick walls so often in this work that we forget to celebrate. And so when we get something good happening or someone says, yes, we can do that, celebrate it. And the last one is starting anywhere leads everywhere. So this is about no matter where you start, it's going to go somewhere. It's going to lead to bigger things. It's going to lead further down the track. So just start anywhere. So I'd like to say terima kasih to you all for listening. And I just want to remind people, particularly because you're our neighbours, next June in Darwin, so not far from you at all. We are part of the planning team for the World Community Development Conference. And this conference moves around the world. Every year it's in a different country. And this year, my colleague Michelle and I, we won the bid. And so we're holding it in Darwin. And it's called From the Edge. And so we will be on the edge of Australia, and we very warmly invite and welcome all of you to the edge to come and join us there. So thank you very much, and I will stop sharing my screen now. Thank you. Yeah, it will, well, no, the weather will be great for you. It will be too hot for me. Ah, hmm, yes. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so so there's two questions. So one, so one, yep. Okay, so let's start there. So because the first thing that I thought of with that is who did the mapping? Who mapped the assets? If it was only yourself and a researcher, go and do it again in community. Go and ask the community to help you map them, because you will build relationships and you will find out things that you didn't know about. So I think part of that, like co-creating and co-design, is very important. And sometimes it can take more time, but it is so much richer. And so I would go out and walk the streets, talk to people, find out more about the assets and build relationships. So that's the first one. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, most definitely. One of the key reasons why, yes, we talk to an individual, to a student, about what are your skills and abilities, and what do you know, what do you have to offer, is that it is empowering, you know, for a student who maybe thought that I don't have a lot to offer. I don't feel like I'm very smart yet, or I'm still learning, or whatever it might be. When we actually talk to them about their gifts of the head, hand, and heart, and, you know, any of those kind of different skills and abilities, people feel a sense of pride. They feel like they have something they can offer. And then we can build from there, because they might say something like, oh, one skill I have is cooking a dish that my grandmother taught me. Now, a lot of people might not think of that as a traditional, you know, skill that you might put on a, you know, a job application or something, but it is something that is part of their lived experience and their wisdom. So, and it might be when, let's say, they're out in community or service learning, whatever it is, they might meet someone who they can have a conversation with about cooking, about culture, about grandmothers, about whatever it is, but it will help them build their relationships. So I think the more that we can help people understand and identify their own gifts and their own skills and abilities, the more empowered people will start to feel, and they will be able to articulate it sooner and more quicker the next time you ask. So yeah, I think it's a very important, the glass half full is a perspective for everyone. A lot. Yeah. Mm.
So it really requires a huge paradigm shift.
All right.
Right? Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much. So I think, Pak Agus, you can ask both speakers to mention the word punten later on, yeah, because we don't have much time left. I think we can have one more question. Bapak-bapak, Ibu, mungkin Ibu dulu ya. Ibu, silakan. Mas, tolong ini.
Well, if whoever speaks English, I'll stay after and talk to
Okay.
anyone, you know.
Yes, Ibu, please. Ibu dari mana?
Okay,
Ibu siapa?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Salwa. I came from Stein, Bengkalis, Riau Province, Indonesia.
Okay, today's I have one questions related to your research, Mr. Professor Marta Sibak. Okay, because your concentrate is on philosophy of humanism. Okay. My questions on, maybe I need your idea, okay, talking about your research paper, talking about Islam, Pancasila, okay, and it's related to national education of Indonesia. Okay, I'm so absolutely agree on your research finding, okay, because Islam as the pillars we have interconnected to Pancasila and it's well implemented. But you see, what we have this principle, of course, we see the phenomena right now, okay, it's sensed by our children, our future generations, but the real context, the real implementations on Pancasila is the real characters of our leader. Okay, so right now. So what do you think? What is your opinion? Our children see the media. Okay, they see the real leaders happens right now. Okay, one example. Okay, we see there is good attitude too from our leadership. And sometimes, okay, it makes sense of the big ones, okay, like corruptor or other sons. Okay, what should we do in our generation? Because you see from their media, oh, this is our nation. Okay, and I believe that not all Indonesians, all countries have their own principles. How could we are, as an educator, we are from our nation, part of this nation, to make they more careful, or they need to be more understand about these principles. Okay, thank you, Professor Mata, for your more explanations about this.
Well,
okay, and I close by Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bu Salwa.
I hope this helps. So I think that I really like the ABCD, but I was thinking that you'd make sure and organize it so every project has a faculty member that's Muslim and one that's not Muslim, and then you have students who are different religions, and especially you might have Chinese businessmen funding it a little bit and getting the logo, so they're literally observing interfaith. And I just think you should, the kids shouldn't be exposed to that much media, right? But also you just have to talk them out of it. Like, you need to have actual communities going on, and you can say, well, you know that people aren't like that, right? Because you know, here they are. So you have to convince, you know, just make sure that people actually are bonding with each other so they don't believe what's on there. And then there's also the problem of that a lot of my politicians really don't believe what they say, but it's what gets votes, not because they want that to be true, but they do think their party will do a better job than the other party, right? And so you just have to explain that, because it is polarizing, right? It's terrible, but that's why you can't just sit and watch TV. You've got to actually community build, or you're going to be in deep trouble.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to hear a comment from D also, Bu Salwa? All right, thank you very much. So, any more questions? Bapak-bapak, Ibu? Is Bapak? Silakan, Pak.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
I'm Masrudin from Iain, Palopo, South Sulawesi. Now I'm working on tourism village as my community service.
All right.
So that my questions for both of the presenters.
All right.
The first one is about the university and community engagement is, of course, related to and must be supported by the local government,
Yep.
especially the local government. So this is one of challenge for me, as my experience, that sometimes the local governments do not really support something like what we plan to do in one place. So maybe from both of the presenter has their own experience in international community, university community engagement related to the involvement of local governments in the one area to support the community from the university. And the second one is about the ABCD method in community service. What I have done so far, that I have already know that there are two kinds of high-hanging fruit and low-hanging fruits in ABCD. So I know that when we have a high-hanging fruit, it's a very long time to achieve the goals to support the community. Just like what I want to do in my community is related to as professional tourism places in my village, something like that. Hanging fruit, something like young generations. So that's what, so my questions related to this is, of course, I want to listen from both of the presenters about their suggestions about to achieve the goals of our high-hanging fruit. It needs collaboration from many. In university, we have so many knowledge, science, and something like that. So we have to support each other. So what your opinion about this? I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much. So, Professor Marta or D?
I think D should probably start.
Yeah,
since
sure.
She has the most
D, would you
experience.
like to give your comments on the first question? The researcher here, Pak Nasruddin from Iain Polopo, said that he didn't get enough support from the local government in doing his community building project. What's your comment on that, D?
All right. So I think that they're similar answers for me, actually, but maybe just different context. So the one with local government, I understand your local government has more layers than mine, but it's still a very similar challenge. And, you know, I've worked and applied ABCD in 22 countries around the world, and they're all the same. There's some kind of bureaucrats or red tape or hierarchy or something that people come up against. So I would encourage you to find the champions, find those cracks of light, find the people who understand what you're talking about, who are in those different areas of hierarchy or in the bureaucracy. And build relationships with them. It's really when we're up against something that we might be being told no, or there's red tape or lots of paperwork or things that are trying to, you know, hold us back. Keep building relationships. There will be a tipping point. It is a really natural way of life, you know, when we kind of focus or move towards something that or what we are aiming for, there will be something that will happen. So I would encourage you to build relationships. I think that's really key. And like I said, we do have it happen here. And it mightn't be in the department that you're first talking to. It might be going and talking to someone else. But find who those champions are who are maybe talking the same language as you or have similar ideas. So that then going into that low and high hanging fruit, I think my response would be very similar about building relationships. The other thing that came to mind was sometimes that low-hanging fruit is, like I said before in that summary, remember to celebrate those small steps, because low-hanging fruit can happen really easy sometimes, so you keep moving on. But you forget to go, hey, wow, look how far we've come. We've actually taken 6 small steps. Let's remember to celebrate that. in celebrating that, you're also inviting other people in to see your successes and hear about what you're doing. It could also aim towards that higher hanging fruit. The last thing I'll just say with that high fruit is who identified it as the high hanging fruit. If it's one person's idea and you're just aiming for it and not getting there, who else can you call in around you? Who else cares about it in the same way? Having those conversations about other skills and abilities people can offer so it can become a low-hanging fruit as well. So yeah, I think in mobilizing assets, which, you know, look, identifying the strengths and assets of community, when we connect them up, we find ways forward. And then we just need to create those opportunities for them to be productive together. So yeah, it's we're all relationship based. It's a natural way of living for us, and I think we need to intentionally focus on that a bit more as well. Thank you.
What I'm thinking, I lived in a small town in Arkansas, and it's just, they hate government, and it's radically individual. It had a very high drug addiction rate and all sorts of kids in foster care. It was really awful. And I volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. Do you know what that is? I mean, it's a good idea, but you're volunteering, and the people doing it are saying, well, capitalism creates winners and losers, and so the winners have to help out those poor losers, and we get to go to heaven. And I just like, I don't want to be part of this. Like, I couldn't even do that anymore because I'm just supporting this pro-capitalist system. So it just occurred to me, like, you know, the people they're addicted, right? Maybe you could get them to come to these groups, but you can't just, like, I'm the poor, you know, I'm the one that's the loser, and this, again, it just sets you up that way. But if people could get together, what assets do you have? Like, are you a good cook or something? And then decide, we want to start a business. And there is this restaurant business in Los Angeles of all former cons. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but just you've got to get people active, not passive, and you've got to get them not being clients, as you say, and these pros are going to mold you to fit their idea of what social cohesion. I mean, Dee, do you understand how deeply embedded the client as passive, you know, blank slate that this knowledge is going to mold? You understand how deep and how damaging that is. And so when you say wisdom of the community rather than knowledge of the expert, you know what I'm talking about, huh? With
Yes.
the paradigms, yes. And I do think we can move forward into something better than we've ever had, because, again, Aristotle was used for colonialism. You know, it was a big bludgeon. So we just have to definitely adapt it, but it's so intuitively obvious that people have capacities, right? Kids, little kids love to do stuff. Like, you have to teach them to sit still or something, right? Yeah, okay.
All right, thank you very much, both. Thank you, Dee and Professor Masabek. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, everybody. We have to end the conversation too soon. But I believe that both speakers can be contacted. I believe they can establish a long-term correspondence with both of them. And once again, Dee, thank you very much. And Professor Martha, thank you very much for being with us today, everybody. So the keywords that we collected today is engagement, collaboration, are key to sustainable change. And then there are lots of wisdom in the community, and we are doing research to seek wisdom to create a better world for the kids in the future. So everybody, this is the end of the first plenary session this morning, and thank you very much for being here with us this morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Lala and all.
Thank you.
Dimohon untuk tetap di panggung, Bapak. Iya. Kepada panitia dimohon untuk menyediakan plakatnya. Sesi ini adalah penyerahan cenderamata dari Bapak Lala Bumela Sudimantara PhD selaku moderator pada hari ini kepada Profesor Martha Sibek. Silakan kepada fotografer untuk mengabadikan momen ini. Cenderamata ini merupakan silaturahmi, tanda terima kasih kami juga kepada Profesor Martha Sibek. Semoga bisa menjadi penyemangat untuk lebih berbagi lagi dan terus berkarya. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Professor Martha Sibek. And we would also like to say thank you to Ms. D. Brooks.
Silakan kepada moderator dan narasumber kembali ke tempat.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite our student from BKI Iain Syekh Nurjati Cirebon to entertain you with his special performance.
Sesi berikutnya yaitu penampilan spesial dari Marshal Raja Pilgriman. Kepada Marshal disilakan.
Satu terkasih kulihat di sinar matamu, tersimpan kekayaan batinmu. Oh, di dalam senyummu ku dengar bahasa kalbu mengalun bening menggetarkan. Kini dirimu yang selalu bertahta di benakku, dan aku kan mengiringi bersama di setiap langkahmu. Nyanyi yuk, Bu. Percayalah, hanya diriku paling mengerti kegelisahan jiwamu, kasih, dan arti kata kecewamu. Kasih, yakinlah, hanya aku yang setiap langkahmu. Percayalah, hanya diriku paling mengerti kegelisahan jiwamu, kasih, dan arti kata kecewamu. Kasih yang gila, hanya aku yang paling memahami. Indah sanubarimu, kasih, percayalah. Terima kasih. Baik, sekali lagi halo ibu bapak semua. Jangan tegang-tegang ya bu, kok saya jadi tegang. Nervous soalnya di hadapan saya banyak sekali orang-orang hebat. Saya jujur nervous ibu bapak, tapi nggak apa-apa ya. Saya ucapkan selamat siang, bapak ibu masih semangat ya? Alhamdulillah. Oke. Bapak Ibu, perkenalkan, nama saya Marshall Raja Pilgriman. Saya salah satu mahasiswa di Iain Syekh Nurjati Cirebon dari jurusan Bimbingan dan Konseling Islam. Baik, supaya nggak lemes-lemesan lagi ya, satu lagu lagi. Kali ini lagunya lebih ngebeat. Semoga Bapak dan Ibu tahu. Sebenarnya tadi kenapa diem, supaya ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak semua ikut nyanyi. Ternyata nggak ada yang nyanyi ya. Berharap tak berpisah. Ingatkah kan dirimu yang menyakiti diriku? Kau kecewakan aku, tapi ku maafkan salahmu. Kini berganti kisah, aku yang menyakiti dirimu. Tapi apa yang terjadi? Kau meninggalkanku. Yo, izinkan aku untuk terakhir kalinya semalam saja bersamamu, mengenang asmara kita. Dan aku pun berharap semoga kita tak berpisah, dan kau maafkan kesalahan yang pernah ku buat. Ingatkah kan dirimu yang pernah menyakiti aku? Kau kecewakan aku, tapi ku maafkan salahmu. Kini berganti kisah, aku yang menyakiti dirimu. Tapi apa yang terjadi? Kau meninggalkanku. Yo, izinkan aku untuk terakhir kalinya semalam saja bersamamu, mengenang asmara kita. Dan aku pun berharap semoga kita tak berpisah, dan kau maafkan kesalahan yang pernah ku buat. Nyanyi bu. Gitu mudahnya. Ada yang tahu lagunya? Aduh, ada yang bantu saya nyanyi yuk. Ada nggak ibu? Ada, ayo ibu. Ayo. Oh enggak.
Thank you, Marshal Raja Pilgriman, for his amazing performance.
Penampilan yang luar biasa dari Marshal Raja Pilgriman mampu mencairkan suasana Bapak dan Ibu atau kurang? Ya, Bapak dan Ibu, kita sudah selesai untuk mengikuti sesi plenary pertama.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as the first plenary session is over, we would like to inform you that the lunch is ready next to the entrance door. For those who would like to perform salat, our musola is available in the Graduate School Building A on the 3rd floor. Our LOs will be glad to help you on the way. And please be reminded that the second plenary session will start promptly at 12:30 p.m. But before we leave, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a picture together with our wonderful speakers today, Professor Martha Sibek, and speakers for the next session, Miss Lina Kalvayan and also Mr. Samsuryadi. Please come forward.
Bapak dan Ibu dimohon tidak meninggalkan ruangan terlebih dahulu karena kita akan melaksanakan sesi foto bersama. Bapak dan Ibu dimohon untuk berdiri dan tetap di kursinya masing-masing, tapi mohon berdiri. Kepada panitia dimohon untuk mengambil momen kebersamaan kami di cuaca Cirebon yang alhamdulillah hari ini cerah. Dimohon berdiri sejenak Bapak dan Ibu. Kami akan mengambil foto dari sisi panggung. Jadi dimohon
Pak Samsuryadi
menghadapnya ke arah sana, Bapak. Iya.
Bapak Samsuryadi,
Silakan
apakah
Bapak.
sudah berada di sini, Bapak Samsuryadi?
Kami konfirmasi dahulu apakah narasumber untuk sesi kedua sudah hadir, Bapak Samsuryadi? Oke. Silakan Bapak Ibu, kita akan sesi bersama. Kita beri aba-aba. Baik. 3, 2, 1. Boleh gaya bebas katanya Pak, ini ada sayup-sayup dari belakang. Tolong dong gaya bebas katanya. Siap, kita ambil gaya bebas. 1, 2, 3. Perlu ada teriakan juga Bapak? Boleh. Boleh teriak nama Universitas PTK Iain masing-masing. Terima kasih Bapak dan Ibu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Martha Sibek and also Miss Lina Kalvayan. Please take a seat.
Baik Bapak dan Ibu, ini ada informasi sejenak.
Okay, as we have already informed you before that the lunch is ready next to the entrance door. For those who would like to perform salat, our musola is also available in the Graduate School Building A, Gedung Pasca Sarjana A ya Bapak Ibu sekalian, on the 3rd floor. And our LOs will be very glad to help you on the way. And please be reminded once again, that the second plenary session will start promptly at 12:30 p.m. Thank you.
Itu yang dapat kami informasikan Bapak dan Ibu. Bagi Bapak dan Ibu, sesi masih akan berlanjut, yaitu sesi pemaparan kedua yang akan dimulai tepat pada pukul 12.30. Untuk ruangannya masih di sini Bapak dan Ibu. Silakan Bapak dan Ibu beristirahat sejenak untuk ibadah salat zuhur. Kami sudah